Hello friends, subscribers and new viewers of this channel, and welcome to FreeCAD robotics and mechatronics tutorials. In this FreeCAD tutorial, we are going to explain how to implement from scratch this crank slider mechanism. To implement this mechanism, we need to create an assembly of several parts. The mechanism consists of base, everything here is base, then consists of this linear slider, then it consists of this crank, then this rod over here, and after creating these parts, we connected everything in assembly. Note over here that we are using FreeCAD 1.0, however, everything explained in this tutorial can be used in other versions of FreeCAD, including versions that have a higher number or a lower number, as long as they have the assembly option over here. A lot of viewers of this channel are not mechanical engineers or mechatronics students. Consequently, let's briefly explain the basics of crank slider mechanism. The main purpose of this mechanism is to convert linear motion into circular motion. Namely, over here you can assume that there is some force acting, and this linear motion is being transformed into circular motion of this point over here. That is, as we move the slider, this point over here describes a circle. And in that way you can convert linear motion into circular motion. Crank slider mechanism has different applications in robotics, mechanical engineering, automotive engineering, and in other applications. By going through the exercise explained in this tutorial and by learning how to create this crank slider mechanism, you will learn a lot of useful things. One of the most important things is how to create assemblies and how to implement joints. Namely, over here, this joint over here is a revolute joint, as well as this one. However, this joint over here is a cylindrical joint. On the other hand, this joint over here is actually a slider joint. Okay, let's start with explanations. In this video tutorial, we assume that you know almost nothing or very little about FreeCAD, and consequently, we will spend a significant amount of time explaining all the steps. Then, our suggestion is to install FreeCAD 1.0 or a later version. Once you start FreeCAD, you will see this screen. Click here to create a new file. And let's call this file as base. So click here, and then over here, let's call the file as base and press enter. And let's save this file by clicking File, Save As, and then let's go somewhere to C. Let me see over here, and I'm going to save it inside of this folder. Make sure that base is selected, and then over here click, and let's create the first part. As the name suggests, the first part will be the base. The base will support the slider and the crank. So after you click on body over here, that is after you click here and you click here, let's create the sketch. To create the sketch, click here and select the, for example, XY plane. So let's click on the XY plane, and now you're in the XY plane and you can create your sketch. Let's turn on the grid, and then over here click and make sure that snap to grid is selected. So let's create our part. First of all, the base is a rectangle with fillets. So let's create a rectangle. Click here and create a rectangle. Over here, you don't need to accurately specify the dimensions. We are going to adjust them later on. So for example, sketch a simple rectangle. Here it is, and do the right click to exit the rectangle menu. Now, if you're completely new to FreeCAD, then over here, degrees of freedoms, which are abbreviated as D of Fs, might look confusing. So what are the degrees of freedom? Well, if I click on this rectangle, you can see that I can do several things. I can move it and I can change its dimensions. And we don't want to do that. Consequently, we need to constrain the degrees of freedom. So let's learn how to do that. Okay, let's constrain this length to be equal to 100 millimeters. To do that, simply select the side, then find an appropriate option. You need to find this dimension constraint, click here, and click on constrain horizontal distance, and let's go, for example, with 100 over here. Let's, for example, constrain the vertical distance or the vertical length to be equal to, for example, 50. So select this side, click here and find constrain vertical distance, and let's go with 50 over here. Good. Next, we need to eliminate 2 additional degrees of freedoms. That is, we need to constrain the translation. We need to center this rectangle at this point. The easiest way to do that is to select this point, then select this point over here, and then what you need to do is to simply again click here and constrain horizontal distance. Let's go with 50 over here, and then let's constrain the vertical distance to be half of this length, that is 25. Again, click here, then click here, and constrain vertical distance to be 25, and good. Now you can see that our design is fully constrained. Let's add fillets. To add fillets, click here and find the fillet option. Here it is. Click here and click here, and you can see the first fillet is created. Then click on this side. On this side, here's the second fillet. Click here and here. Here's the third fillet, and click here, and here's the fourth fillet. Do the right click to exit, and you can see that we have 4 additional degrees of freedom that we need to constrain. These are these radiuses. So click on this arc over here, press and hold Control, click on the second arc, then press and hold Control, click on this arc. Okay, I need to do it again, so let me do it carefully. First this one, Control this one, Control this one, and Control this one. That is, while selecting them, keep Control always pressed. And then let's constrain the radiuses. Click here and click on Constrain Radiuses, and let's go, for example, with 8 as a radius. Good. Now we have a fillet. Good. Everything is being constrained and everything looks good. Close this. The next step is to extrude this base. To extrude this base, you need to use pads. So make sure that sketch is selected and find the pad option, and let's go with, for example, maybe 4 millimeters. 4 millimeters looks good. And click on OK, and now we have the first part of our base. Next, we need to create a support for our slider. Let's learn how to. Here the strategy is to create a new sketch and to map this sketch to this face over here, and then in the plane which contains this face we can create our 2D projections of our extrusion. So let's do that. First of all, make sure that body is selected, click here and select any plane. For example, you can go with this plane or this plane or this plane, or you can simply select the plane from this menu. Let's go with the XY plane and click on OK. Next, click on Close, and over here you will see that the new sketch is created living in the corresponding plane. Next, we need to map this sketch to this face over here. To do that, simply select the face, then click here, expand and attach sketch. From this drop-down menu, make sure that you select Sketch 001 and click on OK, and now if you double-click on Sketch, you will see that we live inside of the plane that contains this face. Good. Let's continue. To create the 2D projection or the foundation for the slider support, we need to create an external reference points. To do that, make sure that you click here, create external geometry, and click on these vertices over here. So click over here and click over here. This will enable us to use the vertices or the points from the external geometry inside of this plane. then do the right click. Okay, now we are all set. What we need to do now is to create a rectangle. So click here, but before you do that, do the right click to exit, and then click here to activate the grid and make sure that Snap to Grid is selected. This will help us to more easily create our design. So let's start. Click here, and then let's create, for example, a rectangle. Then let's do the right click. Note over here that I'm not going to constrain this rectangle over here. I'm doing this for one particular reason. Namely, if I would now constrain everything inside of this two-dimensional sketch, this video tutorial will not last 1 hour, it's going to last 4 hours. Consequently, I'm just going to constrain only the necessary and essential parts, and these parts will be mainly the sliders or something similar to that, something where I need to precisely control the dimensions. Over here, the dimensions are not going to change while you're extruding. However, if you want to be more precise and to be more on the safe side, then whenever you create something that is to sketch, constrain all the degrees of freedom. So keep in mind, I'm not constraining the degrees of freedom, or better to say, I'm just constraining the necessary degrees of freedom in the interest of saving time. As I did in the case of the first sketch and the extrusions, do and follow that procedure to constrain everything. Good. Let's now create another rectangle. To do that, click here, and then let's, for example, do something like this. And let's see what will be the dimensions, or something like this. And then let's try to make it to be as symmetric as possible, something like this. And here we are. Let's go with 8. You can even press 8 over here and press enter. And this height, let's do with 7. And here it is. And do the right click. And then let's do the following. Let's add over here a circle. The circle should be centered at this point. However, let's reduce this dimension slightly. So double click here, and instead of 8, you can, for example, go with 5. And then let's move this little bit such that it's centered. Or you can, if you want to be more precise, you can simply constrain this to be symmetric. That is, these 2 points can be symmetric with respect to this line. And just to show you how this thing is done, you can simply click here, then click on this line, and then find over here this option constrain symmetric, and if you press enter, everything will be symmetric with respect to this line over here. Next, let's create a circle. This will be outer circle of our support for the slider. Click here, then center the circle over here, and then let's go, for example, with either, for example, this radius, or let's do, for example, 6. And let's see what will happen. Here it is. Do the right click to exit, and then let's trim the unnecessary lines. To trim the lines, you find here the option trim edge, and let's start trimming. Trim this, trim this, trim this, trim this, and here we are. And of course, you need to trim this part over here. Click once again, and now everything is trimmed. And do the right click to exit, and over here we need to create the opening circle. Inside of this hollow cylinder you will have slider coming in. So let's do that. Again, click here on create circle by center, click here, and over here we need to be precise. First of all, let's see one very important thing. What is this thing over here? It's the diameter. Here, I'm going to specify the diameter 3. And keep in mind and remember this number. Since the slider diameter should also be 3 millimeters. Do the right click, and now we have the support for the slider. Then close, but before you close, keep in mind that you have 11 degrees of freedom, and if you want to eliminate them, you can simply eliminate them. I'm not going to do that, so simply close, and here it is. Good. Let's extrude this sketch over here, click on sketch and click on extrude, and let's see how long we can extrude this. Over here, first of all, notice that you don't see anything. So let's now click here and let's click on custom direction, and over here see where the x-axis is. We need to extrude this in the positive x-axis, so make sure that this is positive, and then let's start extruding and you will see how nicely this thing is being extruded. Let's rotate and let's see how long we need. We don't need this length over here, maybe something like this. It's your own choice, depending on how you prefer. Okay, let's extrude a little bit more. For example, like this. Good. And now this is the support for our slider. The slider will go inside. Again, you need to adjust the custom direction and you need to specify the x-axis or the unit vector of x-axis, and you will get over here. Click OK, and here we are. Next, we need to create the support for the crank. That is, we need to create a cylinder, and on top of that cylinder, we are going to add another part later on. Okay, so let's do that. To do that, we again need to create another sketch, and we need to map the sketch to this top face. So click on body, then click on sketch, select any plane you wish, click on close, and now you have another sketch. And let's map this sketch to this top face. Again, to do that, simply select this face, then click here and click on attach sketch. From the drop down menu, select the sketch that you just created and click on OK, and voila. Now if you double click on a sketch and if you go here, you will see where we are. We are currently sketching on the top face of this base. Let's create a circle. I'm going to click here and then I'm going to click here. Now the circle diameter should be 2, and or actually let's increase this. This is too small, I think. Let me see. Maybe let's go with the diameter of 3. Okay, let's do that. Let me do right click over here and then let's double click here, or you can simply click here, or let's erase this and let's create another circle. Click here, and then let's go with the diameter of 3, and here it is. Perfect. Let's now do the right click on close, and now let's extrude this. Let's click here, and then you simply need to click here to extrude, and let's go with, for example, maybe 20. Let me see how this will look. It's very important that this cylinder has a higher height compared to the center of this hole over here. Of course, we are not building something that will be manufactured. If you want to manufacture this, you have to be way more careful than I am in this video tutorial. So let's just decrease a little bit and let's see how this thing looks. Doesn't look bad. Okay, and click on OK. And here we are. So that's essentially it. This is our body, and let's change the body name by clicking here and let's call it as base. Here we are. And now let's save it by clicking File, Save. And we just created our first part. Next, let's create the second part. The second part is this crank over here. How to create it? Well, you need to click New, and you can see that you opened basically a new file, a new design. And let's call this as crank. And then press Enter. Then File, Save As, and save this file in the same folder in which the original base design is created. Click on Save, and let's continue. Click on Crank, then click over here to create the body, and let's call this as Crank. So double click on Body and call this as Crank. And here we are. And then let's create a sketch by clicking here. Select, for example, the XY plane, then turn on the grid, make sure that Snap to Grid is selected, and let's start with modeling. First of all, we need to create two circles. One circle will be used or will be attached to the base, and another circle, or better to say another cylinder, will be attached to the rod. So let's start like this. I want my part to be approximately 40 centimeters long or something similar to that, or even maybe 30. Let's go with a smaller value, for example 35. So to do that, let's first create two circles. These two circles will actually define the outer edges. So let's click here, and let's, for example, click over here at maybe 14 millimeters or something like this. So let's create the first circle. The diameter of the first circle can be, for example, 14 or something similar. Then let's create another smaller circle. Click here, and let's see if you're 14 here. Let's go, for example, let me see, 14. Let's go minus 14 over here, approximately here. And let's go with a smaller radius, something like this. Okay, good. And do the right click. Next, we need to create tangent from this circle to this circle. So let's learn how to do that. Click on line, and you can see now that we are snapped to this circle. So click here and click here. These lines are most likely not tangent, and we will fix that later on. And let's do the same thing for the other side. So click here and click here, and here we are. Okay, and then do the right click. Good. Next, if you want to constrain everything, then you can easily do that by following the procedure I explained previously. However, in interest of time, I'm not going to constrain this outer shape. However, I'm going to constrain some important parts. So let's trim and let's see what will happen. To trim, you need to find this option. So trim here, and let's see what happens. This is actually not a tangent. However, you can fix this later on to be a tangent by using the tangent constraint. Here it is. However, in interest of time, I'm not going to do that. So do the right click over here, and let's create the opening over here. To do that, let's now click on a circle, click here, and if you remember, on the base we have the circle whose diameter is 3, and over here let's match this diameter by clicking here and pressing enter. And note over here that this circle dimension is actually constrained to be 3. Good. And that should be it. Now, we need to close this and we need to extrude. To extrude that, make sure that you're in the sketch mode. Click here and let's extrude, for example, for some small value. Let's go with 2 millimeters or something like that, and click on OK. Next, we need to create a cylinder on top of this that will be used to connect this arm over here with the rod. To do that, again, you need to click here, create a sketch, select any plane, for example, this plane, click on close, and let's map this plane to this top face. To do that, simply click on this top face, then over here click, attach sketch, and then over here make sure that you click on sketch, click on OK, OK, and then if you double click on sketch, we live inside of this plane. Turn on the grid, make sure that snap to grid is selected, and over here we need to create a circle somewhere here. To do that, you have several options. In the interest of time, I'm going to use the quick and dirty solution. I'm going to simply click here. I'm already snapped to this line, and let's go with the circle with the diameter of 3. And here we are. Let's do the right click, click on close, and now let's extrude this circle. To extrude this circle, make sure that sketch is selected, and then over here, simply click on pad, and let's go, for example, with 12 or 13 millimeters, and click on OK, and here we are. This is our second part. Let's save this part. To save this part, click on File and Save. Next, let's create the connecting rod. To do that, again, you need to click here, you need to create a new file, and let's call this file as rod. Click here, then click here, then click on this button, name the body as rod, click here, then save, file save as, and save it as rod, and let's create our sketch. This is an easy part. So click here, click on sketch, select the XY plane, turn the grid on, and let's see. Approximately the length of this element should be around maybe 25 millimeters or something like that, maybe 30, whatever you prefer. So let's create such an element. Okay, so let's do the rectangle, and then let's, for example, let's see, this is minus, yeah, this will do the trick, I think, or maybe a little bit more. Maybe let's do something like this. Yeah, maybe like this, minus 14, and then let's do something like this. Later on we can move this, and then let's do, let me see, this was basically minus 14, so I should go to 28, approximately 28. So here I am, and let's make this to be symmetric. We are symmetric, and here we are. That's it. Let's now a little bit increase these dimensions. Let's go here and let's go here. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Again, in interest of time, I'm not constraining all the degrees of freedom. And let's create one circle here and one circle here. To do that, again, click here and let's select the circle, for example, over here. And let's go with the radius of 3. This is very important. And then let's do it over here, for example. And let's go with the radius of 3. And here we are. Awesome. Let's click on close. And let's extrude this. Click on sketch. Do this. And let's go, for example, with 2 millimeters. And click on OK. And this is the rod part. Click on File, Save, and we are left with a single part. That is, we are left with a slider and with a slider cylinder. Make sure that this file is saved by clicking here and then File, Save. Okay, next let's create the slider. Again, click here. Let's call the file as slider. Then over here, click to create the body. Let's call the body as slider. And let's create our sketch. Click here, and then let's select, for example, the YZ plane. Then let's create a circle. Here, it's very important to verify the following. So I will close this sketch for a second, and then I will go back to the base. And then I'm going to look into my base design, and I need to see what are the dimensions over here. You can check the dimensions by clicking here, and then you can click here, and then you can see several important things. Actually, this is the center point. I don't want that, so I have to be more careful what I'm dimensioning. So let me see here, and you can see that the radius is 1.5, and we have to match that radius. Let's now escape, and then let's also verify another thing. And let's close this for a second, and let's go back to slider. So the slider radius should be 1.5. So let's click on slider, click on sketch, click here, then click here, and let's create a circle, center it here, and then let's specify the diameter to be equal to 3, and here it is. Let's now verify that the diameter is okay. You can do several things. You can click here, and then you can actually click here, and then constrain diameter, and you can see that it's actually 3. So we don't need to do anything over here. Oops, I'm now skipping several things here, and here I create an error. So I need to do Control Z, do once Control Z to exit from here, and then do this, and now we are in the problem. So I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to do once again, since you have this over constraint. So let's repeat this. Click here, and another strategy is just to create any circle. Do the right click, then click here, then click on constraint diameter, and let's make sure that the diameter is 3. And now it's fully constrained. Click on close. And now let's extrude this sketch. Click here, extrude, and over here we have to go, for example, even maybe 80. Let's see what will happen if we go with 80. Here's our slider, looks good. Maybe 80 is an overkill, so let's go back to pad and let's do, for example, 70. Although 70 might be too long, but you never mind. Never mind this. Okay, next let's create a small expansion over here with a cylinder on the top. To do that, again, we need to create a sketch, so click here and create an empty sketch, select any plane, click on close, and let's map this sketch to this face. Click on here, then click here and click on attach sketch, select the newly created sketch from the drop down menu, click on OK, and if you double click on the sketch, you'll be now here. And let's create a rectangle over here. To do that, simply click here and let's, oops, I need to press OK and escape. Let me do this. And let's now create a rectangle. Now I'm being basically in a problem. I need to turn on the grid such that I know what I'm doing. Okay, so let me try again. And here I can nicely create a rectangle. Maybe let's go with a little bit thicker rectangle. So let's do something like this. Of course, here in the interest of time, I'm not going to constrain the degrees of freedom. You can do it by yourself later on. Okay, here it is. Do the right click, do the right click again. First left click, then right click to correct myself, then click on close, and let's extrude this. Select the sketch, extrude, and let's extrude this, for example, for something like this. Okay, good. For example, let's go with 6, maybe 7 millimeters. It really doesn't matter. Click on OK, and here we are. Now on top of this surface, we need to add the cylinder. So again, we need to create a sketch. Let's select any plane. Here it is. Close the sketch, select this surface, then click here and click on attach the sketch. Make sure that you select the newly created sketch. Here it is. Click on OK, and here it is. OK. Now, so here double click on sketch. Let's go here and let's over here at the center create a circle approximately at the center, and let's say that the radius of this circle is, or basically the diameter is 3. It's very important that this diameter precisely matches the diameter of the opening on the rod, and that's correct. Let's do the right click, let's do close, and let's now extrude this. To extrude this, simply click here on sketch, let's do extrusion, and let's, for example, go with something like this. Okay, that will be, let's do a little bit more, it really doesn't hurt. Maybe 12 or so. Okay, click on OK, and here we are. Let's save the slider by clicking File, Save, and click on Save. If you miss some dimensions, that is, if some dimensions are not okay, this is not a grave error, we can fix them later on. Good. Okay, and finally we can create to create the assembly, we need to create a new file. So click here and click here and click on the name or the label and change the label as assembly. Here it is. Then let's click here and now click over here and find the assembly, activate the assembly over here. Here we have this very important button which will create the assembly. So click here and several things will be created. This is the standard origin menu and you will see joints. Joints are actually, or joints define relative motion between parts. However, we need to add parts. Make sure that assembly is selected and then find this option, insert component. And now magic happens. Since everything is already here in the model, that is, all the parts are being created over here, this nice button automatically recognizes everything. So let's start clicking, but click only once on a particular things. start with base, and here you need to save this document before you proceed. Let's save it with assembly, and this is very important. Here it's written the following: do you want to ground the first inserted part automatically? You need at least one grounded part in your assembly. So the program is very polite and tells us in advance that we need to support or fix first or ground one part, and we are going to use base as a fixed part since base will not move. Yes, we want base. Then click again on the crank. And where is the crank? Well, the crank is here below, and then you can, later on we are going to fix it, so for the time being it really doesn't matter. Click on rod, then the rod will be added. We are going to move the rod later on. And click on basically slider over here, and the slider will be added. And later on we can change the motion, or actually change the positions. And that's it. Click on OK. We have everything inserted, and click on OK. Now, let me show you why this type of modeling is very, very important. First of all, notice how the colors are the same. We don't want that. So go back to the base part, click here, do the right click, and change the color. There are several ways to do that. You can click here, then click here, and let's select some color. For example, let's do with, for example, something that looks like an orange color or something similar, something like this. Okay, close, and here it is. Now the base is this brass color. Okay, so we now finish this. Let's do the same thing for crank. Click on crank. Let's do the color, for example, red. Do the right click, appearance, click here, and then let's do the color, for example, something like this. Click on close and click on close, and now the part is red. Let's do the same thing for rod. For rod, I will go with the dark blue. Appearance, let's click here, and then let's go with something like dark blue, and click on close, and then for the slider, I'm going to go with magenta. Click here, click on appearance, click here again, and let's go with something, maybe not magenta, maybe something like this. Okay, let's do it. Here it is. And now if you click on assembly, you can see how the colors are nicely changed. Next, let's reposition these parts such that we know what we are doing. Double click over here on assembly, and then if you click on element, and let me show you again, double click here on assembly. If you click once and twice on the element, you will see this coordinate system. So twice click, and then you will be able to move it as you wish. So let's do something like this, or you can simply select it and you can move it. So let's put it here for the time being. And if you don't know how to move and rotate the view, to pan the view, press and hold the middle mouse button and move left and right. To rotate, press and hold middle and the right mouse button, and to zoom in, simply roll the middle mouse button. So click here to deselect. Then let's double click on this element and let's just slide it or move it a little bit up. And then over here, let's double click on this element and let's move it over here. Good. Now we see all the elements. I'm going to simply click and move, drag it over here. Let's start creating our joints. Okay, to create our joints, we first need to do the following. We need to create a linear joint or a slider joint between this slider and this support. Not a big deal. How to do that? Well, click here, then press and hold Control, and then click over here on this inner surface of this hollow cylinder. And now you select it. You will see over here several options. You need to find slider joint. And if you click on a slider joint, you see what happens. You have positioned this and you have created a slider joint between the slider and the support. Now over here, you will see this option, and then you need to rotate this for, let's say, 180 degrees, such that we properly position this Here we are. Okay, beautiful, beautiful. And now magic happens. So now you can simply move and you can see how this element or part slides with respect to this base. Congratulations, you have created your first slider or your first joint and first assembly. Next, we need to do similar thing for this crank or this arm and this part over here. Make sure that you select this circle, then press and hold Control and select this top circle of the base. Both of them they should be selected, and then find over here revolute joint. And here we are. We have just created a revolute joint. And let's see what's happening over here. Once you have created a revolute joint, you need to slide it down a little bit such that approximately they are in the same plane. However, the plane really doesn't matter since this is just an intro tutorial. So let's do a little bit like this and let's see the view from the front. Is this approximately in the same plane? Well, maybe this is. Okay, and click on OK. And now let's see what happens. We have created our second joint. Okay, beautiful. And this is the revolute joint. To see all the joints, go back on here on Assembly and expand joints. You can see the grounded joint, the slider, and the revolute. And finally, we need to create, again, another revolute joint between this part and this part. So select this circle over here. Press Control, or let me do again, hold Control and select here. Then while Control is being held, click here and then click again. Create revolute joint, bang, here it is. And now we have created another revolute joint. Let's now modify the position and offset. Let's go like this somehow. This looks good, looks very good. Okay, you can do something like this. And finally, we need to do the last thing. We need to create basically a cylinder joint or cylinder connection between this part and this part over here. So how to do that? Well, to do that, you need to repeat the procedure. However, make sure that you click OK here, and here you need to do some trial and error. First of all, let's see one very important thing. Start with these circles. So click here, then press and hold Control, click here, and then find this option, create cylindrical joint, and let's see will this thing work. It worked. Perfect. No issues, okay? Click on OK. And that should be basically it. Let's try to move this and let's see what happens. Yes, it moves perfectly. Of course, here there are a number of things that can be improved. For example, this arm is relatively short and these dimensions are not appropriate. Maybe you can improve this. For example, this rod over here should be much longer probably than this arm. However, we are doing this just for demonstration, and this is just a proof of principle. Okay, that's all for today. I hope that you like this video. If you like the videos I'm creating, please press the like and subscribe buttons, and see you in the next video.